development, it becomes aware of its imperfection and loves. This formula of love is universal. All the laws of nature are its servitors. Thus, gravitation, chemical affinity, electrical potential, and the rest. And these are like mere aspects of the general law. So now the magus is love, and bindeth together. And woe, thrice woe, and 4 times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For as the laggard and the dastard are lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew your oath, for that day is of sinister augury, and deadly charged with danger which ye feel not, to overflowing with gay deeds, and bold of masterful, of manful chastity. Silence. Of all the magical and mystical virtues, of all the graces of the soul, of all the attainments of the spirit, none has been so misunderstood, even when at all apprehended is silence. And woe, thrice woe, and 4 times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For as the laggard and the dastard are lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew your oath, for that day is of sinister augury, and deadly charged with danger which ye feel not, to overflowing with gay deeds, and bold of masterful, of manful chastity. Silence. Of all the magical and mystical virtues, of all the graces of the soul, of all the attainments of the spirit, none has been so misunderstood, even when at all apprehended is silence. And woe, thrice woe, and 4 times woe be to him who is allured by the adventure, slacking his will, and demitted from his way. For as the laggard and the dastard are lost, so is the toy of circumstance dragged down to nethermost hell. Sir Knight, be vigilant, watch by your arms and renew. The chastity whose magical energy both protects and urges the aspirant to the sacred mysteries is quite contrary in its deepest nature to all vulgar ideas of it. For it is, in the first place, a positive passion, in the second connected only by obscure magical links with the sexual function, and in the third, the deadliest enemy of every form of bourgeois morality and sentiment. It may assist us to create in our minds a clear concept of this noblest and rarest, yet most necessary of the virtues, if we draw the distinction between it and one of its ingredients. Purity. Purity is a concept of it connotes the absence of all alien admixture from any given idea as you get a chat like that. Put it in the chat.
Jeff Jensen all day long. It's crazy. Jeff spends a lot of time on this. He's lonely. He's lonely like most men who don't know God.
Understanding the nature of knowledge, the culmination and stasis of the intellectual faculties, has been discussed in the previous essay. It implies a contradiction in terms. Understanding is the resolution of this antinomy. It is the chief quality of neshama, the intelligence, an idea insusceptible of true definition because supra-rational and only appreciable by direct experience. One can say at most that it is independent of any of the normal modes of motion of the mind. It is a significant illustration of the truth of this Kabbalistic theory that women often possess most excellent intelligence while totally incapable of the knowledge and reason on which logically it is founded. Samadhi, at first onset productive of bewildering ecstasy, automates in this understanding, one may understanding the nature of knowledge, the culmination and stasis of the intellectual faculties, has been discussed in the previous essay. It implies a contradiction in terms. Understanding is the resolution of this antinomy. It is the chief quality of neshama, the intelligence, an idea insusceptible of true definition because supra-rational and only appreciable by direct experience. One can say at most that it is independent of any of the normal modes of motion of the mind. It is a significant illustration of the truth of this Kabbalistic theory that women often possess.
But the fact that the tariffs are affecting everybody, now everybody's in the same boat, right? You know, it's us against the world. We can't win, right? Trump is he is so convinced that we've got the nut, right? We've got the winning hand, and even, you know, what's his name today said the same thing. The Secretary of the Treasury came out and said China thinks they have the cards. They're holding deuces. They're not holding deuces. They got a strong hand. We got nothing. You know, we're just.
They have a very strong hand.
So, Peter, I have a question for you. Given your history in the market, I've been myself in the market for about 30 years, and we've seen over time, going back to, say, long-term capital management as an example of how certain events can happen in the economy on a political level or whatever that can expose crowded trades in the market that are over-leveraged and cause a crisis. So right now, I think the one that's being exposed is the Treasury basis trade, which is over leveraged by some hedge funds between like 5 to 10%. And that trade is blowing up big time. Can you talk about that? I assume you know about that. And what's the volatility in the Treasury market?
Well, look, I think a lot of people are long and wrong in the bond market because they expected bonds to rise when the Fed cut rates. And this is another thing that I nailed. For almost a year before the Fed cut rates, I was saying that when the Fed finally cuts rates, that's going to be the top of the bond market. And long-term rates are going to start to rise as soon as the Fed starts to cut. Now, that was way against the consensus. And I was 100% right. When the first 75 basis points of cuts produced a 75 basis points rise in long-term yields. Everybody was surprised by that. That's exactly what I was forecasting would happen. And a lot of people are still waiting for the rate cuts to bring yields down. And in fact, Donald Trump, one of the things he said is like, you know, we have sky-high interest rates. When he was, we need to bring down these sky-high interest rates. They're not sky-high. Interest rates at 4%, 4.5%, they're low. And when you consider how much debt we have, they're super low. And so I think that bonds are a massive bubble. I think some of the biggest losses are going to be in the bond market, even more than the stock market, especially if you're leveraged long. So, I mean, this you know, it's almost like treasuries are the new subprime, right? Because that's what's going to happen. This is a sovereign debt crisis that we're going to have. And when you have a sovereign debt crisis, there's no bailouts because the government bailed out the mortgages by substituting its credit. Right? The government did a TARP program. The U.S. government bought up all this toxic debt and issued treasuries. But when the treasuries are toxic, that's the end of it. There's nothing. There's no bailout. Right? So yeah, I mean, look, the financial system has never been in worse shape because we didn't swallow our medicine after 2008. We didn't clean up the mistakes that caused 2008. We tripled down on them. And one of the when they had these hearings in 2009, they wanted to have these hearings to try to figure out why we had the financial crisis. And I tried to get invited to those hearings because I knew why, because I predicted it. But they wouldn't invite me to speak or testify. Instead, every person who testified, not a single person who predicted it testified. In fact, all the people that were oblivious to it, who said it could never happen, they're the ones that showed up to explain why it happened. Now, of course, they don't know, because if they knew why it happened, they would have been with me warning about it. And of course, everybody that they invited to testify, they all had the same conclusion. It was, we didn't have enough regulation. We didn't have enough government, right? And so we just needed to give the government more power. We needed to give the Fed more power, when it was the government that caused it. But, so they just used the financial crisis as an excuse to further empower the institutions that caused the crisis. And so because we did that, we are so much more screwed up now than we were in 2007, 8 before the crisis, which is why this next crisis is going to be so bad, which is why, Trump shouldn't have poked the bear. I mean, it shows you the arrogance to not realize the fragility of the country. And I know Donald Trump knows that if we lose the dollar's reserve status, because one of the things he's been threatening to do, hey, if I see you moving away from the dollar, I'm going to hit you with tariffs. He said that. Nobody better move away from the dollar, or I'm going to tariff the hell out of you, right? So he knows that that's kind of our Achilles heel. Yet he still risks it. And that's the ultimate. I hear people say, well, would China sell our treasuries? Oh, they would never do something that stupid. Why would they sell our treasuries? Of course, duh. People say, well, China would really get hurt if they sold our treasuries because, it would make the bond market go down and they would take a hit on their treasuries. So why would they do that? No one ever says, well, what would happen to us if they sold the treasuries? It's way worse for us. In fact, if China sells its treasuries, it's good for China because they were going to lose a lot of money if they held them. So the sooner they can get rid of them, the better for China.
But Peter, isn't there?
I think a lot of people on Twitter focus on the stock market, but where you can see, the fragility you talk about is in the bond market. And it just seems like the average, Twitter or financial expert doesn't really understand how bad things are and how levered up funds are and how quickly this whole thing can really
everybody is clueless. They think the Fed is full of a bunch of geniuses when they're actually economic imbeciles. They created all the fires that people credit them for putting out, and they put them out with gasoline, so they're always going to come back worse. People think that they were able to solve the problems because they don't understand the problems that they actually made worse. And that's why, I'm never surprised by this bad stuff because, it's exactly what I say is going to happen. They're constantly surprised by all the things that they never thought were going to happen, which is why, when Powell said that, we're not going to have stagflation, he said, I can't see the stag and I can't see deflation. I was on my podcast saying, well, that's going to go down as subprime is contained and inflation is transitory. I said, there's so much stag, there's so much inflation. It's amazing to say that he doesn't see any evidence. There's evidence all over the place. He's got to be completely blind to that. So the guys that we think are so smart are clueless, absolutely clueless. The economic professors, the ones that rise to the top, they're a bunch of Keynesian fools. That's why they have their jobs. And the guys, the Wall Street economists, are mainly there to help Wall Street sell bonds and stocks to the public. So they put a ribbon on everything, and they're a bunch. They go from academia to the Wall Street firms to government. They all, because you don't get a government job unless you're Keynesian, and Wall Street wants to hire the guys that used to work for government, and it's all like this little circle of morons, and they're all surrounded by themselves, and it's like an echo chamber. And they all like reinforce their moronic economic views, and so this is just going to be a disaster, But anyway, I'm not going to go anywhere because we got a lot of people on the spaces, so I'm willing to keep talking, but I got to take a couple-minute break because I ran out of water, and I have I'm on antibiotics now, so hopefully that gets. I've had this thing, and it's been in my throat, but I got to get more water, and I got to pee because I drank so much water. Now I got to go to the bathroom. So I got to take like a 5-minute break. I'm going to leave my phone right here, and I'm going to come back. So if everybody sticks around, I'm going to come back. And again, what I'm going to do is I have a bunch of people that are that can speak, but what you guys should do is just once you've got a mic, just raise your hand, put the little orange wavy thing up, and then I'll just call on you. So, and then as somebody speaks, I'll let you drop, and I'll make somebody else a speaker. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Hence also any aspiration of a partial order, any which depends for its wisdom on the justice of our perceptions of our own needs, is almost certain to be tainted with the very poison of which nature would purge us. There is in fact only one magical operation of whose propriety we may always be sure, and that is the increase of our sum of energy. It is even indiscreet to try to specify the kind of energy required, and worse, to consider any particular purpose. Energy being increased, nature will herself supply clarity. Our vision is obscure only because our energy is deficient. For energy is the substance of the universe. When it is adequate, we are in no doubt as to how to employ it. Witness the evident case of the will of the adolescent. It is also to be well noted that moral obstructions to the right use of this energy cause at once the most hideous deformations of character. Hence also any aspiration of a partial order, any which depends for its wisdom on the justice of our perceptions of our own needs, is almost certain to be tainted with the very poison of which nature would purge us. There is in fact only one magical operation of whose propriety we may always be sure, and that is the increase of our sum of energy. It is even indiscreet to try to specify the kind of energy required, and worse, to consider any particular purpose. Energy being increased, nature will herself supply clarity. Our vision is obscure only because our energy is deficient. For energy is the substance of the universe. When it is adequate, we are in no doubt as to how to employ it. Witness the evident case of the will of the adolescent. It is also to be well noted that moral obstructions to the right use of this energy cause at once the most hideous deformations of character. Hence also any aspiration of a partial order, any which depends for its wisdom on the justice of our perception. Here, the great obstacles are these. Firstly, the misunderstanding of self, and secondly, the resistance of the rational mind against its own conclusions. Men must cast off these two restrictions. They must begin to realize that self is it.
Dr. Rowland, he's been...
Hello, Dr. Rowland. I've been patiently waiting.
Your old style, they don't care. It's...
Yet let it not be forgotten that though she be love, her function is but passive. She is the vehicle of the word of Kakma, wisdom, the old father, who is the will of the old one, and thus they err. With grievous error and dire, who prate of love as the formula of magic. Love is unbalanced, void, vague, undirected, sterile, nay, more a very shell, the prey of abject odds, demonic.
Okay.
Love nefesh with matter, with the universe, is and must be only painful. The senselessness of the whole procedure sickens it. It begins to seek for some menstruum in which the universe may become intelligible, useful, and enjoyable. In Kabbalistic language, it aspires to neshama. This is what we mean in saying that the trance of sorrow is the motive of the great work. This trance of sorrow, which must be well distinguished from any petty, personal despair, any conviction of sin, or other black magical imitations being cosmic in scope. Comprehending all phenomena, actual or potential, is then already an opening of the sphere of neshama. The awareness of one's misfortune is itself an indication of the remedy. It sets the seeker on the right road. Nothing but the realization, born sooner or later of agonizing experience, that its whole relation to Ruach and Nefesh with matter, with the universe, is and must be only painful. The senselessness of the whole procedure sickens it. It begins to seek for some menstruum in which the universe may become intelligible, useful, and enjoyable. In Kabbalistic language, it aspires to neshama. This is what we mean in saying that the trance of sorrow is the motive of the great work. This trance of sorrow, which must be well distinguished from any petty, personal despair, any conviction of sin, or other black magical imitations being cosmic in scope. Comprehending all phenomena, actual or potential, is then already an opening of the sphere of neshama. The awareness of one's misfortune is itself an indication of the remedy. It sets the seeker on the right road. Nothing but the realization, born sooner or later of agonizing experience, that its whole relation to Ruach and Nefesh with matter, with the universe, is and must be only painful. The senselessness of the whole procedure sickens it. It begins to seek for some menstruum in which the universe may become intelligible, useful, and
The
enjoyable.
prime market was going to collapse.
Kabbalistic language.
And how that was going to create financial crisis. This is '06. So I told everybody, I've got a way for you to profit from this, right? I come to my workshop. I'm going to show you how you can short subprime mortgages, which of course they ended up making a movie out of this, right? The Big Short and everything. It was all about this trade, right? Except I was the one lecturing about it, right? I wasn't sitting in the audience. I was the guy that was telling everybody what was going to happen. So I probably had about 75 to 100 people came to my, which, out of the 3,000 that were there, right? So a small part of the people even came to hear me out. After I told them, one of the jokes that I said, you have about 3,000 people here. In a couple of years, you'll be able to have the whole conference in one hotel room. Because I said, most of you guys are going to be out of jobs because the mortgage market's going to collapse. And I said, but I have a way for you to make some money on that. So these guys come, and I give my whole spiel about what's going to happen. Of those people, one guy invested $500,000, and I sent him back $5 million less than a year later. So he made 10 times his money, from $500,000 to $5 million. But the point is, one guy out of 3,000, and I laid it out whole in the real. I told him exactly, and these guys should have known because they were in the thick of it. They should have seen from ground zero the fraud, right? The phony appraisals, the liar's loans, the nothing down. I mean, these guys were right at the epicenter of the bubble, the mortgage market. And yet I couldn't convince these guys that real estate was going to go down. Nobody can even, whenever I was trying to tell people about the subprime, the thing where I always lost them was that in order for it to work, real estate prices had to fall. And they were like, well, that's impossible. They're never going to fall. Well, why not? Why can't they fall? Look how much they went up. Can't they go down? No. People were just conditioned to think that real estate could never fall. So once people believe something, so you have so many people that just believe the wrong thing about the Fed, about the economy, and they're going to be massively surprised by what happens. But anyway, so who wants to talk? Just raise your hand. Remember, I got a bunch of people with mics, but if no one wants to raise their hand, well, Clinton, you've already talked. Have I got any new people?
I'm happy to wait.
All right. Well, let me see. Okay, there. Well, go ahead, Clinton. No one else got. Oh no, here this guy Noah's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that gold was giving us a sign? Gold has been rising. I mean, it kind of almost doubled, really. I think it was at like 1600 about a year and a half ago. Do you think that gold's rise was sort of warning us? And especially the last couple of weeks, maybe a month and a half, we saw gold go from like 2,000 to 3,000, like literally randomly. So do you think that gold was warning us that whole time that this was going to happen? I mean, we all knew the tariffs were coming, but we didn't think they were going to be this fucking bad.
Well, gold wasn't going up just because of the tariffs. Gold was going up because the world was de-dollarizing. That was the warning. That, gold went up 50%, and the public was selling the whole way. I mean, I know that because I'm in the business of gold, and sales have been very slow. I also know that the entire rise from 2,000 to 3,000, the investing public was selling gold. There was net outflows from GLD, the gold ETF. There's been selling of gold stocks. So the only buyers have really been foreign central banks. And it's like, well, what do they know, right? Because I've been saying that this is like insider buying. The central bankers are the insiders of the fiat monetary system. And the fact that all these foreign central banks are buying gold and not treasuries and foregoing the yield.
We didn't think they were going to be this fucking bad.
They know a lot.
Well,
right?
Gold wasn't going up just because of the tariffs. Gold was going up because the world was de-dollarizing. That was the warning. Gold went up 50%.
People don't understand.
The public was selling the whole way. I mean, I know that because I'm in the business of gold, and sales have been very slow. I also know that the entire rise from
when Greenspan was Fed chairman, and this shows you how long ago it was, he used to say that even though we weren't on a gold standard, he ran monetary policy as if we were. And what Alan Greenspan said was that if he sees the price of gold going up to $400 an ounce, he knows that he's too loose. And if gold goes below 300, he's too tight. So he used the gold price as a reference. So if, according to Alan Greenspan, $400 gold meant that the Fed was too easy, what the hell does $3,000 gold mean? I mean, so the whole time that Powell has been claiming that they had restrictive monetary policy, gold was saying, you're too easy. You haven't raised rates enough. That's the problem. That's what I said. The Fed stopped hiking too soon. We never actually got to restrictive. But the other way you know that is that the debt never stopped. The government kept borrowing. Government debt hits record highs. Household debt, credit card debt, all the debt kept growing. Well, inflation is an expansion of money and credit. How can you claim to have tight money when credit keeps growing? So credit kept expanding the whole time the Fed was hiking. That means they never got to the point where they hiked enough. So we never got restrictive. We've been accommodative the entire time. Okay? So, I mean, the Fed is responsible for the calamity that's about to unfold. Again, maybe Trump is the pin to prick the bubble, but he didn't inflate the bubble. The Fed did.
Peter, why do you think that he went from reciprocal tariffs to punitive tariffs?
But the other way you know that
first
is...
of all, in order to... I think the whole thing is unconstitutional, and I think it's illegal.
Totally.
But the reason that he had to say reciprocal was that was his justification. Because Congress seated the president with the authority that constitutionally belongs to Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, because tariffs are revenue bills, they're taxes on the American public. But Congress gave the president the authority to impose reciprocal tariffs if he wanted to. And what they meant by reciprocal was they put a 5% tariff on our lumber, we can put a 5% tariff on theirs, right? Tit for tat. Whatever they do to us, the president can match it, right? So what Trump did is he took that authority for reciprocal tariffs and he just redefined reciprocity to mean that even if a country has a 2% tariff, we can hit them with a 30% tariff and call it reciprocal. And the way he was able to do it is he concocted some crazy formula that took that country that had 2% tariffs and made it look like they had 60% tariffs. And then he said, well, because they have 60%, I'm only going to go 30. See, I'm being a nice guy. I could have done 60, but I'm only going to reciprocate with 30.
But I think his formula was more on it was based on the trade imbalance. And so if the United States spent more in Vietnam, for example, and there was a huge tariff or a huge deficit, then he would be punitive in the amount of tariff to make up for that gap.
Yeah, I mean, basically what Trump did is he assumed every deficit was due to hidden tariffs that we couldn't see, right? If we have a deficit with this country, they must be cheating with some non-tariff barriers that we can't quantify, and so we're just going to assume that there are tariffs, and we're going to reciprocate against those non-existent tariffs, which to me is a lie. He doesn't have the authority to do that. You can't change the meaning of a word to take power that was never given to you. So, I mean, the whole thing is illegal. And so one of the things that might save us is that the courts strike it down. But how long does it take for that to happen? Somebody has to sue withstanding, and then the court has to hear it. But again, and the Republicans that control Congress are afraid to stand up to him.
So they'll just do whatever he wants.
Yeah, they got no spine. I mean, Rand Paul will do it. He's like the only guy out there that I see, but then he's always the only guy. Unfortunately, we don't have enough Rand Pauls.
But why go so aggressive and against every country? And then he's saying, not only do you have to make up for these deficits, but the money you cost us in the past, you're going to have to pay for that too.
Look, it's nonsense. There's no rhyme or reason. It's, as I said, I think he's on a mission from God. He just thinks he's, the holy man. Now,
by the way, what you're explaining is called the Messiah complex.
Yeah, all right, Davey, that's it. Yeah.
Okay,
what does it take for that to happen? Somebody has to the guy with his hand up. He's got like Chinese symbols or something in his name. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a long traveler.
Hey.
Hi, Peter. I just want to say thank you so much. I'm a fan of you for almost 20 years. I watched, 2007, those two fools laugh at you on the CNBS. And I was shorting the stocks, shorting the banks, home builders, listen to you at that time. So, very big fan of you. And I think you are the most honest economist. And also, you are the only one makes any sense in this country. It's a travesty that Trump did not use you in his administration. I hope in the future you'll be one in a position to help American rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, nothing would make me happier than to be able to, go down to Washington and actually advise him to do the right thing. But right now, I think the environment around him is way too toxic for that to happen. I mean, he's also surrounded by people. The crypto people wouldn't let me anywhere near him. But all they care about is making money in their tokens. People say, well, Peter, you're just saying this stuff because you own gold and you want to make money. I own gold because I know the government's going to do the wrong thing. But I'm not encouraging them to do the wrong thing. I want them to do the right thing. But my investment portfolio is based on them not listening to me. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to shut up. So everything, when people say, oh, you're just talking because you want to make the price of gold go up. The price of gold is going to go up whether I talk or not. But I want the government to do the right thing. if they did the right thing, I would make less money than I'm going to make by them doing the wrong thing. So if they do the wrong thing, I make a lot more money. But I don't need to make that money. I'd rather them do the right thing because I care more about the country than about my making money. But if the country is going to collapse and I can either make money or lose money, well, I might as well make it, right? Because those are my choices. I can profit from the collapse or I can lose. But, hopefully I make enough money that maybe I can make a difference. I mean, because if I were to run from office, I ran for Senate one time, and I didn't. I self-financed to a degree, but I also raised money.
I just want to say that you're doing the right thing. What you just said, you said many years ago. I heard you made this point at least maybe more than 10 years ago that you don't want to make this money. But I just want to say that what's coming, maybe Trump is basically, just like you said, creating the bubble. This bubble was created maybe more than 20 years ago. Trump had nothing to do with this.